Alright, in this quick tutorial we're going to see how to make background objects move by within our catch and avoid game. So let's take a look at this real quick and we'll pick it apart. So taking a look at the level that contains the movement in this game, I'm going to load this up. And we have our enemies, and our enemies move, and our background objects move. We have catch and avoid objects. So the enemies move, you may know this already by looking at some behaviors that make it work. And so here's enemy movement. So this is a real simple thing for the enemies, but spawning them is another thing entirely. So the bundles themselves move by using a once and a number, and that feeds velocity set to forward. As long as the forward direction in physics is set to the direction that you want to use, that's what's important there. Now also important is that when it leaves view, it says in view is one of the trigger behaviors, and when you use out, that means when it's out of view, you then connect it to a destroyer. The destroyer, of course, is in the components list. So that part's pretty straightforward. However, when you want to spawn them, I guess, let's see, the spawning of these objects is developed as part of the spawning objects here. So in case of the enemies or the other catch and avoid type objects, we're using a timer set to repeat at whatever time you choose. This is in tenths of second, and then we do a random, and the combination of these two items, the how frequently this occurs with the timer, and then the random, that's going to create a frequency or a regularity of how often it's going to choose to roll the dice to create a new enemy or a new catch object. So if the filter determines that to be of a greater than or less than a certain value, it's then going to send that value to a router to choose one of the objects. A number, this number here is the Y or the X value, and the other one is, depending on which way your game is going, if this is set to 5 on the Y, it's going to show up at the top somewhere, and this random is set to 0 to 320. So this is the range of the width of your game, or if you're running the other way, it's the height of the game set to the Y. Now we could actually take out the Y value, so just stick to the X, and that's going to assume then that the Y will be set to 0. So that's going to work just fine. So that's going to roll, and we'll have those objects rolling through. So this one's set to NPC 1, NPC 2, and NPC 3. So make sure that you set the value, and this is actually set to negative 50. So I'm going to put that back to 0. So at some point I had that spawning above the game. And so now we've got to set to 0. So those are all going to come through. And there's two things that have to be connected. The router itself randomizes the next route. And you can pick as many routes as you want from, well, with one there'd be no point, but 2 or 3, it's going to randomly choose between them. So this is kind of a built-in setup for doing that. Now, if we take the same thing and apply that to our background objects, the only difference is that the physics is set to movable but not solid, not affected by gravity, and not enabling collisions. And of course, the direction has to be set to the correct direction to make it work. So for background objects of that type, that works pretty well. Excuse me. Now, looking at another style of a game, if you want to have objects that roll through pretty regularly, let's take a look at this on the road game. This one's pointing the other direction, but it doesn't matter which way it's going. What I want to look at here is objects that roll through in the same exact spot every time. This is actually quite a bit easier. So in this case, we've got the generator again, and in this case, I've got a thing I called same gen. So this one, if I open this up, auto start. This one actually generates 3 objects in different places. So in this case, I've got 3 road dots that's rolling through, and so as I roll this, you're seeing it's put them in different places. Now, the 667 is the one at the very bottom. I should put these in order, but I haven't yet, of course. Well, let's see. The 667 is actually the right side, and then 130 is the top one, and then 375 is the bottom. This one actually creates the curbs. So as you can see, the curbs are coming by on the top and bottom of my road. And the thing that makes this work, there's no random to it. It's always happening. It's consistent, and so it's a bit simpler in this respect. And if I change the delay, you see we get gaps every time I change this. So you can just sit there and live time experiment with the numbers until you get one that you like the results of. So as I keep reducing the number, every time I change it, actually, what it does is it kind of skips one. So you can kind of keep bumping that until you get a gap, and then back it off by one. There's a gap, and I'll back it off by one more. So this is always a repeating, and that's for your background objects. Hope that works.